a father who is taking his wife and son to the cinema. But the father doesn't join them and instead just sends his wife and son at that particular day. The father says that he is unable to pick them both up because he has a lot of work to deal with. Therefore, the wife is given money and told to take a taxi rather than taking the bus because the bus has a high crime rate according to him. After a few hours, the son and his mother have finished watching the movie, and the woman follows her husband's words, where she decides to take a taxi back to their home. At first, nothing suspicious happens and the mother tells the taxi driver her home address before starting their way home. However, the route taken by the driver doesn't head to their destination. The taxi driver instead takes them somewhere far away without a clear destination. It is at this point that the mother begins to worry and believes that something is wrong with this driver. Plus, he remains silent when the mother scolds him and tells him to pull over. The mother then tries to escape, but the driver prevents her from doing so by locking the taxi door. A short time later, the taxi driver stops on a very quiet street and punches the mother, knocking her unconscious. The boy and his mother are then taken to the taxi driver's house. So far, what this man intends to do is still unclear. Not long after, the mother is forcibly pulled and separated from her child. She tells her son to cover his ears if he hears screams to keep her son calm. With such a hopeless state of mind, the boy can only hear his mother's screams, which causes him to pee in his pants. After that, he is also pulled by the man into the house. He is told that his mother has died and will no longer take care of him. The little boy who listens to this can only cry at this moment. The next day, the boy is told that the psychopath's name is Bob. Bob tells him that he must obey all of his orders without exception. The boy will be assigned to clean up the psychopath's house if there are traces of a massacre. He is also assigned to prepare breakfast for Bob in the morning, while he's not allowed to eat anything without orders from Bob. If he wants to eat, the only food he can eat is what is left on the psychopath's plate for his additional task. He is told to collect missing persons news from newspapers and tape it into a scrapbook. These are done to make it as a collection, and so that Bob knows who has become his sadistic victim. At the end of the explanation, Bob says that he will call that young boy as Rabbit. After Bob leaves the house, Rabbit is told again to clean the house until it is clean of the blood of his victims, and he starts doing what the man said. Rabbit actually intends to run away from this psychopath's house. He immediately takes advantage of the situation by climbing to the top of the house ceiling. However, it appears that Bob has been waiting for him outside, since he has predicted Rabbit's movements. Bob then purposely lets Rabbit scream as loud as he can so he will know that no one is there to help him. We can see that it is unlikely that anyone will come to help him because Bob's house is the only house in that area. As a result of his actions, Rabbit's legs are tied by Bob with a long chain. In order to increase surveillance, Bob deliberately places cameras in every corner of his house. Every day Bob will kidnap women just to fulfill his unsatisfied lust. After he done it, the victims will of course be killed by Bob so that his crimes are not exposed. And the rest of the sadistic acts done by him will always be Rabbit's job to clean it up. For about 10 years, Rabbit has now grown up in a mental state that is not good, where every day he only hears the screams of women kidnapped by Bob. In fact, Bob has never kidnapped a male passenger. While carrying out his criminal activities, he still makes money as a regular taxi driver if he gets a male passenger. Until one day, there is a father and a son who get into his taxi. Bob can see that the boy is being scolded and beaten by his own father, and he appears to be stressed as he listens to the father's words to his son. As soon as he gets home, he can't stop thinking about that father and asking Rabbit some questions. Rabbit is then asked about what good things his father did before he was kidnapped. But Rabbit is unable to answer that question. Following that, Bob then says that Rabbit shouldn't be abandoned with doing nothing, and that he has to learn something. Therefore, he gives Rabbit a human anatomy book so that Rabbit can learn and know something. At this point, Bob begins to consider treating Rabbit as his own son. If Rabbit succeeds in understanding how the human body works in the book, Bob promises to take him outside the house and get a girl. But Rabbit says that all he wants is to be reunited with his father. As a result, Bob becomes irritated and then shows a photo of his father with his new wife and new family. In other words, Rabbit currently has no one and only Bob is there to take care of him. Day after day have passed, Bob continues to kidnap someone, while Rabbit is busy learning about human anatomy. Rabbit is also cared for by Bob into everything in his daily life. In order to help Rabbit in improving his abilities, Bob always asks questions about biology during each of their activities. For about 10 years, Rabbit has spent his life listening to the screams of the victims. Bob also frequently invites Rabbit to play cards with him to entertain himself. The card game of a psychopath is also certainly the most different from the others, where they both have to guess the identity of the kidnapped victim. Those who hold the ID cards of the victims will say their names, and the other one will guess the age, as well as the background of the victim. Until now, the dead bodies of Bob's victims are always cleaned by Rabbit and buried in secret room. One night, Bob has a nightmare related to his past. His father appears in his dream, where he always torments his brother and himself. Bob, as the older brother, has always been the target of his father's physical and verbal abuse. Even worse, he is also told to have sex with his own mother with the reason that he is not allowed to have relationships with other women. Crazy things that happened to him as a child left him traumatized, and he had no social relations at all. It can be said that he has been under extreme mental pressure since childhood. His past is the reason of his constant desire to kidnap women in the present. The next day, Bob kidnaps another woman to serve as the final test for Rabbit. Bob kills the drunk woman by slashing her neck. He then asks Rabbit which part he has just injured, and Rabbit replies quickly that the knife pierces the neck vein known as the carotid artery. At this point, Bob is getting more pleased with Rabbit's level of intelligence. As a reward, Rabbit is told to choose one of the girls from the school yearbook. He purposely lets Rabbit to choose so he could feel a woman's body for the first time, but Rabbit still refuses to obey Bob's orders. He knows that if he chooses a woman in the book, Bob will definitely kill his choice. However, when Bob sees the frightened Rabbit, he feels pity for him and immediately releases the chain from his leg. For the first time in 10 years, Rabbit is able to feel what it's like to walk without chains again. After that, Rabbit is once again forced to choose a girl from the yearbook. In the end, Rabbit's choice falls to an 18-year-old girl named Angie. With a free delivery charge, the package ordered by Rabbit immediately arrived at the house. Following that, Bob tells Rabbit to take a look at the girl he has chosen. Bob says that this woman is a practical test for Rabbit to put Bob's trust in him. After being sent into the room, he tells Rabbit to have sex with Angie. He also threatens that if Rabbit doesn't do it, then Bob will finish her himself. In other words, after Rabbit has finished making out with Angie, he will be forced to kill her. Rabbit is then left alone with Angie in the room. He says that he doesn't want to kill Angie because he knows that she is just an innocent victim. After Angie hears this, she is amazed by his kindness and offers to have sex with him if he wants. At this point, Angie only hopes that she can get out of there safely with her offer. But Rabbit doesn't want anything from Angie, while Angie keeps forcing Rabbit to touch any part he wants. When they are about to start their action, Bob suddenly opens the door and shouts Rabbit's name. At that moment, Rabbit immediately stabs Angie in her stomach with a knife because he knows it is something Bob has been waiting for. After that, Bob, who is asleep, notices Rabbit dragging Angie's body into the secret room to be buried. Rabbit then stands in front of Bob and says that he is now ready to start hunting. The next day, Bob prepares a hunting clothes for Rabbit. He also buys Rabbit a new chair to sit with him as his psychopath son. Rabbit now looks a lot better, far from the psychopath's look. After a long time, Rabbit is finally brought back to see the taxi that took his kidnapped mother to this house. He then recalls his mother's screams from the back seat once more. When they arrive in the city, Rabbit is told to choose the type of victim he wants. But for some reason, the women in the city aren't the Rabbit type. Bob then pulls over on the side of the road because there is a police car that passes in front of him. Because Rabbit is a victim of kidnapping, he is then told to hide in order not to be seen. At this point, Bob accidentally notices the reflection in the glass and sees that there is the word help written next to the body of his car. He has finally realized what Rabbit has done, and he no longer has trust in Rabbit. As a result, he wants to go home right away and checks Angie's grave. Behind all of this, it turns out that Rabbit has written it down when he pretended to see the back seat. While Angie, who has been stabbed by Rabbit, isn't really dead. Actually, Rabbit has succeeded in applying the knowledge of human anatomy he learned when he stabbed Angie in the stomach. Plus, he stabbed Angie in a part of her body that did not cause damage to her internal organs. He knew that Bob would stab if he didn't do it first. Rabbit also told Angie to pretend to be dead when he was about to drag Angie into the secret room. He also left Angie a flashlight and a knife inside her grave, just in case. This was all done by Rabbit because he realized that sooner or later Bob would find out about all of this. When they get home, Bob punches Rabbit in the face, knocking him unconscious. At this very moment, Bob will go to Angie's grave and intends to kill her. Meanwhile, Rabbit has regained consciousness after hearing Bob's screams and attempts to enter the house. Angie, on the other hand, has quick reflexes and slashes Bob's leg with a knife right away. As a result, the severe wound on Bob's leg makes it difficult for him to kill Angie in that place. Not long after, Rabbit comes straight in and engages Bob in a fight in the dark. Finally, Bob is slashed to death with a knife by Rabbit in the carotid artery. Angie, who has no idea what is going on, can only witness it in front of her eyes. In the end, Rabbit manages to save Angie and put her to rest in the house. Meanwhile, Bob, who has been killed, is buried in a secret room. Rabbit is now able to search for the house of his father named Brad. It turns out that what Rabbit has previously heard from Bob is true, since his father already has a new family with a more luxurious life. Furthermore, his own father doesn't remember his face after they've been apart over a decade. Therefore, Rabbit has to be honest that he is the son of Brad named Tim. When Brad finds out that his son is still alive, he immediately hugs Tim. His father then takes him into the house. After that, Rabbit gives a letter to his father in which he discovers the truth about the events that led to his tragedy. According to the letter, his father has given money to his brother who worked as a taxi driver. Brad also left a message for his brother telling him to kidnap Rabbit and his wife after they had finished watching the cinema. In other words, the psychopath who killed Rabbit's mother and kidnapped Rabbit for 10 years is actually his own uncle. This also explains why Rabbit's father told him and his mother to take a taxi instead of taking the bus home. It was all planned so that the father could get away from his wife and child in search of a new wife. After Brad finds out that his actions have been exposed, he immediately tells his new wife and child to go upstairs. There is a photograph of Rabbit's mother and her son, as well as a check which will be given to Bob. From this evidence, all of his father's secret for 10 years are revealed. His father deliberately sent his brother because he knew that Bob's life is not as good as his. Therefore, Brad, who has evil goals, tried to take advantage of Bob's psychopathic nature, and he can also give some money to Bob's ongoing survival. After everything is revealed, Brad, who is already angered with Rabbit, slaps him many times, and his wife immediately defends Rabbit, but she is beaten back by Brad. Rabbit has had enough of witnessing a woman being tortured and has reached a point where he can no longer bear it. As a result, he immediately hits his own father right in the vital point and causes him to die. Brad's wife isn't angry with Rabbit at all, but rather pity for him because of his situation. She then lets Rabbit go before calling the police, claiming that a group of people had broken into her house and killed her husband. In the end, Rabbit returns to Bob's house where he lives there with Angie. Film ends. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Bye.